Large bases can be a little daunting. All that space just staring at you like a 3D blank canvas, but it's also an incredible opportunity to put some diorama-level scenery onto your army bases. I'm talking epic, I'm talking multi-layered, I'm talking over the top. I'm talking you gotta be a little insane to take things to this level, but we all know that's where the magic happens. So in this video, I'm gonna be showing you how I take large bases to the max, and I'll be sharing some helpful tips and strategies on how to divide and conquer your large bases, regardless of the amount of detail you choose to put into it. I'll also be sharing a comparison between the standard epic basing resin packs and how to leverage 3D STLs for an even more uniquely customized approach. Let's jump in. Now you guys all know that I'm a Magic Sculpt fiend, but when it comes to basing a larger model like this, you may want to use a lighter and more cost-effective option like Cork. If you can get your hands on this thicker stuff, it will help you build things out a lot more quickly and give you the opportunity to pin in large details like these trees. And yes, we are going to be building a forest base. So one of the things I'm trying to do at this early stage is visualize how the key details are going to play off the shapes of the model. And this just gives me an early idea of the composition. And once I'm pretty confident in that, I'm going to be taking that large piece of cork and gluing it down to my base. And then since I know that the trees in the background are not quite tall enough, I'm also going to add some cork pieces to the back to build up that slope and elevation. And you'll also notice that I'm concentrating the glue towards the inner part of those cork pieces because we will be chipping away at their sides later. And whenever you finish a stage like this, it's always good to check the fit of your model, and then we can go into refining the cork. And I like to do this with a set of pliers rather than a knife, just because it's going to create more of an irregular edge. And the cork also gives us the benefit of allowing us to pin our trees in, giving them some hold before we commit to gluing them in. And then we're going to continue refining our cork by tearing off little pieces with the tweezers. And all I'm trying to do here is create a more gradual transition between the different layers of cork so that it doesn't feel so abrupt. And I really love the texture that this leaves behind. You can even take some of those small pieces that were torn off and glue them onto the back side where you have any flat edges to your cork, and that's going to help eliminate the flat edges, give it a more natural look, and also gives you the opportunity to extend your base a little bit if you need to. We're going to do one more test fit to make sure our trees are in the right place, and then we're going to go and cover this whole thing in PVA glue. This is one of the slight downsides of working with cork. It's just that its surface is so dusty that the Magic Sculpt has a hard time sticking to the surface. So we need to coat the whole thing in glue to create a protective barrier. And when you apply this, try not to leave any excess. Make it as thin as possible because that's going to speed up the drying time and get you back to working a lot faster. And yes, we are still going to be doing a Magic Sculpt layer, and you're going to want to mix a fair amount of it for this large base. But it is a good thing that we started with the cork layer because that did help us to conserve a lot of materials. And with our glue layer having dried, the putty should have no problems sticking to the surface. So we're just covering the whole thing in a thin layer that's going to allow us to stick our bits in afterwards. But first, let's refit our model. And I just like to dip the feet in some water to help prevent it from getting stuck to the putty. And I just gently push it in to create a bit of an imprint, and you can kind of wiggle it back and forth to get it to loosen. You don't want it to stick so hard that the putty tears away. And now that we know where the feet are going to be placed, we can continue filling in the rest of the cork with our Magic Sculpt. And all we're trying to do here is, again, create more of a transition between these layers so that we have a more gradual slope. And again, I really like doing this with little pieces of Magic Sculpt just because it helps to give you a more natural look. It's going to create a lot of irregularities from all of the little cracks and crevices that are going to be created from this layering effect of the putty. So right now, because we have two trees in the background, our composition is looking a little bit too symmetrical and stagnant. So what we're going to do is place another smaller tree detail in the foreground here to create a triangulation effect, which will allow our eyes to flow more seamlessly between those foreground and background details. And as a result, we've now created three distinct zones of interest on this base. And now, rather than having the whole blank canvas to try and fill, we have broken it up into three more manageable sections with centerpiece details that we can build all of our smaller details around. Now, the next element that I want to introduce is this granite rock, and I want to fit it into the slope between these two layers. And the great part about Cork is that if we're not getting a great fit, we can always go back in and cut and modify to get it to fit more smoothly. If you want to extend your rocks too, you can combo them together by just putting some putty in between and squishing them together. At this stage, I was trying to figure out whether adding more trees was the right move to amplify the foresty look. And sometimes you just have to place them on there and see how it looks. And if it's not really working, you can always move them around and see if they enhance the composition in a different spot. Now, after placing that first rock formation, I started to see an opportunity to use the granite rocks as a way to connect the boundaries between our three areas of interest. If you want your base to feel like it's full of diversity, an important thing to make sure is that you are dispersing your details to each area of the base so that you have a little bit of representation of each of the elements, no matter which angle of the model you're looking at. So you don't want to just concentrate all the rocks on one end and all the trees on another. You want to spread them out. And always feel free to cut or adjust things as needed. We didn't really need to have that extra tree stump in the back. And what that back area of detail was missing was some representation of the rocks. So instead, I cut out the cork, and I'm going to place another boulder in the back there so that we have our three groupings of trees there. We have our three groupings of rocks. And now we also have some spaces left over where we're going to be able to place our foliage. Now, when it comes to placing foliage, you always want to start with the larger clusters, obviously just because they're going to help you to fill space the most effectively. Now, a basing set like the Verdant Grove is going to come with a lot of variety in foliage types. So my recommendation here is actually to keep similar designs together because we already have the contrast of all of the rocks and the wood happening. So you don't need too many different plant types in one area. Instead, you want to focus on taking those leaves and overlapping them with other foliage or finding ways to overlap the leaves with rocks and trying to create these interesting layering patterns that are going to amplify the intricacy and complexity of your basing. As I move to the front, I'm going to continue placing some tongue ferns and water leaf plants just to create some continuity between the background and foreground. And if something doesn't fit quite properly, you can always put a little piece of putty underneath it just to help it sink in. And this is also a great technique that you can use on rock pieces if you want to embed other plants into them. You can just kind of tear away the excess after just to blend it in. On the other side of the base, I'm going to be introducing some of our classic ferns alongside some ground cover plants. Again, switching things up a little bit, but not going too crazy with the diversity in any one particular area because we want to create a little bit of repetition to simulate the natural way that plants grow and spread out in nature. So you want to create diversity across the entire base, but you never want to take like 5 individual plants and just line them up in a row next to each other. All right, and now it's time for our texture paint stage. And I know you might be thinking, we've put a lot of bits on this base, and how are we going to get it in between all of those cracks? Well, first of all, don't be afraid to get the texture paint on your bits. If you use a little bit of water on your brush, it becomes easy to push the texture paint past the bits and into the cracks. Okay, so you want to just make sure that you put the texture paint down and then go and dip your brush in some water. And that's really going to help you to spread it around and disperse it easily and push it in underneath all of those overlapping pieces of foliage. Another great example here where the leaves are very close to this rock. I'm just going to put the texture paint on the rock and then use the water to push it in behind those ferns. And when we get to the actual cork part that we want to cover up, here you can be much rougher and looser with this. And you can even leave some of the cork texture showing through if you like that type of look. And it depends on how much you water down your texture paint, but use a larger, coarser brush to help spread it more quickly. And we are all done with base number 1 with a perfect fit for our dreadnought. So we've seen now how to use standard basing bits designed for 32mm bases and spread them out to cover a large surface area. And part of me loves the insanely meticulous process of puzzling out the landscape with a variety of small pieces. Of course, though, there's easy ways to cut down on some of the elements. The rocks, for example, could just be represented by the rough, rocky ground that the cork layer provides. And you could, of course, use actual rocks, though I'm personally not a fan of making my bases weigh a ton. And the resin rocks just provide a more consistent look and are easier to modify by cutting or drilling if you need to. But what if we could cover a lot more ground a lot more quickly? That's where Epic Basing's 3D STL files can give you that next level customization. From scaling to suit your specific project, to printing as many bits as you need. If you're hardcore into getting things just right, you're gonna love the flexibility that this gives you. For base number 2, we're gonna be building a combo environment using the same granite rocks and granite tors, but scaled up, and a variety of plant designs found in our Rainforest basing set. Let's dive in. Here we have some of our granite tors that have been printed at 150% of their original size, and I'm going to be combining them together into a larger rock formation. And as you can see, these rocks all have a cavity underneath, which will allow you to place putty there so that you can just squish the rocks together and get them to stick to one another. And then all you got to do is just go around the edges and peel away the excess putty. It's going to create a strong bond and a seamless finish. We're gonna skip the cork on this one and just put down a layer of Magic Sculpt because we have that massive rock formation that's gonna help us to fill a lot of the space very quickly here. And otherwise, I'm just gonna take a block of Magic Sculpt to put under the model's feet so that I can make sure that I'm accommodating the pose of the model while I build around it. I'm gonna cut away some of the excess here so I have more room to place another granite tor in the front. And that's just going to create some more continuity between the foreground and the background, and also help to hide the fact that that middle piece is just Magic Sculpt. And really, I want this base to be all about the rocks, so the more quickly I can fill that space with rocks, the better. I'm going to even place another boulder here in the middle just to amplify the amount of rocky ground we've got going on here. And to help the Magic Sculpt blend in, we are going to do some hand sculpting, and this is really easy to do. You just need a spatula-like tool to create some flat planes and transitions on this shape, and then you can just go in and refine those and put some smaller nicks and scratches to amplify the texture. Then I'm going to go in with our largest plant detail, which is these alocasia plants, and these are going to serve a similar function to the trees in the last composition. So you can see I'm arranging them in this triangular effect to try and create distinct areas of interest on the base. And these large boulders give us plenty of opportunities to insert plants into the cracks, so just put down a piece of Magic Sculpt, push the bit in, and then clean up any excess. And again, with our foliage, we're always looking to create layers, so look for opportunities to overlap leaves, overlap your leaves with other rocks, or place bits in front of other bits. And now we're on to texture painting, and again, you can see how much more quickly this build came together simply because we had larger pieces to use that consume that space more quickly. And again, when we're applying the texture paint here, remember to use that water. It's really gonna help you to push things into the cracks, and it's also gonna provide a helpful way to blend the ground into these larger rock areas. If you have any deep crevices between the rocks, you can push texture paint into that as well. And there you have it, 2 epic ways to tackle large bases and have them looking like full-blown dioramas. The final tally for base number 1 came in at 40 bits in total. Of course, keep in mind that this still requires the inclusion of those trees and granite tors, which are quite large and help us fill space more easily. The total for base number 2 came in at 25 bits, with those large rocks really helping us cut down the quantity. Though, again, I did end up layering plants on top of them and into the crevices, which adds to our tally on spaces we didn't necessarily need to have filled. I hope this gives you more ideas and more confidence when it comes to filling those spacious, large bases. And of course, if you like this type of content, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel to help keep us growing. Until next time, my friends, go make it epic.